The most profound grief you'll ever experience isn't the death of someone else. It's the death of who you used to be. Right now, as you listen to these words, there's a part of you that's already gone. The person you were 5 years ago, with their dreams, fears, certainties, and blind spots. That person is as dead as anyone buried in the ground, yet you've never mourned them. You are not the same person who began reading this sentence. Alan Watts. We live in a culture that celebrates birth but ignores the countless deaths that make growth possible. We throw parties for new beginnings but offer no rituals for necessary endings. We're taught to move forward and stay positive, but we're never taught how to grieve the selves we must leave behind to become who we're meant to be. Today, we're going to explore one of the most challenging aspects of human transformation: why growth requires death, why change demands grief, and why the most courageous thing you can do is allow who you used to be to die, so who you're becoming can live. The statistics tell a story that most of us are living, but few of us acknowledge. 63% of adults aged 18-34 find it hard to know what their purpose in life is. 75% of adults between ages 25 and 33 have experienced a quarter-life crisis. These aren't just numbers. They're millions of people standing at the graveside of their former selves, not knowing how to say goodbye. The great deception about change. Here's the lie we've all been sold about personal growth: that change is additive, that you simply stack new experiences, skills, and insights on top of who you already are, that you can upgrade yourself like software, keeping all the good parts while adding new features. But real transformation doesn't work like that. Real transformation is subtractive. It requires you to let go of beliefs that no longer serve you, relationships that no longer fit, dreams that were never really yours, and versions of yourself that you've outgrown. You can't become new without letting the old die. Think about the person you were 10 years ago. Their values, their fears, their idea of success, their understanding of love. If you're honest, you'll realize that person is gone. They died gradually, imperceptibly, through 1,000 small changes, revelations, and surrenders. You are not them improved, you are them transformed, which means they had to die for you to live. The butterfly is not a caterpillar with wings. During metamorphosis, the caterpillar literally dissolves into primordial soup before reorganizing into something completely different. The butterfly contains no recognizable parts of the caterpillar. This is what real transformation looks like, not improvement, but complete reorganization of your very being. Yet we resist this process with every fiber of our being because death, even psychological death, feels like annihilation. We cling to outdated versions of ourselves like security blankets, even when they're suffocating us. The first recognition you must make is this: the person who got you to where you are now cannot take you to where you need to go next. That person served their purpose. They survived what needed to be survived, learned what needed to be learned, and brought you to this moment of possibility. Now they must die so the next version of you can be born. We must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. Joseph Campbell. The stages of identity death. Just as there are stages of grief for physical death, there are stages of grief for the death of your former self. Understanding these stages can help you navigate the turbulent waters of transformation instead of drowning in them. First comes denial. I'm still the same person I've always been, you tell yourself. You minimize the significance of your growth, discount your new insights, and try to squeeze your expanding consciousness back into your old identity. This is your ego's desperate attempt to maintain continuity, to avoid the terror of not knowing who you are anymore. But denial can only last so long. Eventually comes anger, not at others, but at yourself. You're angry at who you used to be for making certain choices, for believing certain things, for wasting time on what now seems trivial. This anger is actually healthy. It's your psyche's way of creating distance between who you were and who you're becoming. You want to be transformed, but also remain the same, to grow but not lose yourself. This is impossible, but the ego doesn't accept impossibility easily. Depression follows bargaining. This is the darkest stage, where you realize that your former self really is gone and there's no bringing them back. You feel lost, disconnected, unsure of who you are or what you want. Everything that used to define you feels foreign. You are in the space between selves, and it feels like death because, in a very real sense, it is. Finally, if you're brave enough to stay with the process, comes acceptance. Not resignation, but genuine acceptance that death is part of life, that ending is part of beginning, that who you used to be was perfect for who you were then, and who you're becoming is perfect for who you need to be now. This acceptance opens the door to rebirth. The crucial understanding is that you cannot skip the grief. You cannot bypass the sadness of letting go. You cannot think your way out of the emotional reality of transformation. You must feel your way through it, allowing yourself to mourn what's been lost, even as you celebrate what's being gained. The archaeology of former selves. Take a moment to conduct an archaeological dig through the layers of your former selves. Each decade, each major life transition, each significant relationship has left sedimentary layers in your psyche. Most people are walking around with the unprocessed remains of multiple former selves, like a psychological graveyard they've never properly tended. Make a list of the major versions of yourself. The child who believed their parents were perfect, the adolescent who thought they were invincible, the young adult who had such clear ideas about how life would unfold. For each identity, ask yourself, what did this version of me believe? What did they value? What did they fear? And most importantly, what did I have to let go of when this version of me died? Some deaths were violent and sudden. A divorce that shattered your belief in forever, a job loss that destroyed your identity as successful, a health crisis that ended your sense of invincibility. Others were gradual and gentle, slowly outgrowing interests, naturally drifting from certain friendships, gradually shifting your values and priorities. The unprocessed grief from these identity deaths accumulates in your psyche like debris. It shows up as depression when you can't figure out why you feel sad despite having everything you thought you wanted. It manifests as anxiety when you sense another death coming but don't know how to prepare for it. The healing comes from finally acknowledging these deaths as real and significant. Each version of yourself that has died deserves recognition, gratitude, and a proper goodbye. They were not mistakes or phases to be embarrassed about. They were necessary stages in your becoming, each one perfect for its time and purpose. The terror of the void. Between who you were and who you're becoming lies a space that feels like death itself, the void of not knowing who you are. This is the most terrifying part of transformation, the place where most people turn back toward their familiar identities, even if those identities are limiting or painful. The void is the space of pure potential where anything is possible, but nothing is certain. Your old self has died, but your new self hasn't fully formed yet. You exist in a state of becoming that feels like unbeing. Every certainty you once held about yourself is up for questioning. This is the dark night of the soul that mystics have written about for centuries. The psychological death that shamans call the dismemberment. The chaos that alchemists knew had to precede transformation. It's supposed to feel like death because it is death. The death of everything you thought you knew about yourself. Modern culture gives you no roadmap for navigating the void. Instead, it tells you to quickly fill the emptiness with new identities, new goals, new distractions. Find your passion, they say. Discover your purpose. Reinvent yourself. But these well-meaning suggestions miss the point entirely. The void cannot be bypassed or hurried through. It can only be honored as a sacred space of transformation. The skill of being with uncertainty becomes your most important capacity during these times. Can you exist without knowing exactly who you are? Can you function without a clear identity to reference? Can you move through the world without the security of familiar self-concepts? The void teaches you the difference between who you are and what you do, between your essence and your roles, between your being and your becoming. In the emptiness, you discover that you can survive without the familiar identities that you thought were essential to your existence. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that there was in me an invincible summer. Albert Camus. The resurrection process. Death is never the end of the story. It's the middle. After the death of your former self comes the resurrection of your authentic self. But this resurrection doesn't happen automatically. It requires your conscious participation, your willingness to midwife your own rebirth. The resurrection process begins with recognizing what wants to be born in you. This isn't about deciding who you want to become. That's still the old paradigm of control and planning. It's about sensing what's already trying to emerge, what's been gestating in the darkness of your transformation. Pay attention to what energizes you now versus what used to energize you. Notice what you're naturally drawn to, what captures your curiosity, what makes you feel most alive. These are clues about your emerging self. The person you're becoming has different interests, values, and desires than the person you used to be. The new self that's trying to be born often feels foreign at first. You might find yourself drawn to activities you never considered before, attracted to people who are different from your usual circle, or interested in subjects that previously bored you. This isn't random. It's your authentic self finally having space to express itself. Your new self needs different conditions to thrive than your old self did. The environments, relationships, and routines that supported your former identity might actually suffocate your emerging identity. You may need to change your external circumstances to match your internal transformation. This is why periods of major personal growth often coincide with significant life changes, new jobs, new relationships, new living situations, new habits. The internal transformation requires external alignment to fully manifest. Your new self contains multitudes. It includes the wisdom of your former selves without being constrained by their limitations. It honors your journey while being free to choose a different path. It's both completely familiar and completely new, like recognizing yourself in the mirror after a profound transformation. The art of conscious dying. Since death of the self is inevitable in any life worth living, you might as well learn to die well. The art of conscious dying means participating in your own transformation instead of being dragged through it unconsciously. Conscious dying begins with recognizing the signs that a version of yourself is ready to die. You feel restless with your current life. Your old interests seem stale. Your relationships feel strained or inauthentic. You're going through the motions of your life without feeling fully alive. These aren't signs that something is wrong, they're signs that something is ready to be reborn. Instead of fighting these feelings or trying to recapture your old enthusiasm, you can choose to honor them as the natural rhythms of growth. Just as trees know when to let their leaves fall, you can learn to recognize when aspects of your identity are ready to be released. The practice of conscious dying involves creating rituals to honor your transitions. Write a letter to the version of yourself that's dying, thanking them for their service and acknowledging their contributions to your journey. Create a ceremony to mark significant identity deaths. Burn old journals, donate clothes that no longer fit your personality. Have a farewell dinner for relationships you're outgrowing. Conscious dying also means choosing your deaths instead of having them forced upon you by circumstance. Instead of waiting for a crisis to shatter your old identity, you can proactively release aspects of yourself that you've outgrown. This gives you more control over the timing and intensity of your transformation. The courage required for conscious dying is immense because you're choosing to let go of the familiar for the unknown. You're trading the security of a known identity for the uncertainty of becoming. The compound effect of multiple deaths. Most people will go through at least 5 to 7 major identity deaths in a lifetime. Each death and rebirth cycle prepares you for the next one. You develop what could be called transformation resilience, the ability to navigate change with less suffering and more grace. The first few deaths are usually the most difficult because you don't understand the process. You think the death is permanent, that you'll never feel whole again, that the confusion and grief will last forever. But as you accumulate experience with transformation, you begin to trust the process. You learn that death is always followed by rebirth, that confusion is the precursor to clarity, that the void is pregnant with possibility. This knowledge doesn't eliminate the difficulty of transformation, but it provides context that makes it bearable. Each death teaches you something about the nature of identity itself. You begin to realize that identity is more fluid than you thought, that you are more adaptable than you imagined, that your essence is more resilient than any particular version of yourself. The compound effect of multiple deaths is wisdom. You stop identifying so completely with any single version of yourself because you know it's temporary. You hold your current identity more lightly, more playfully, knowing that it too will eventually die to make room for something new. This doesn't make you detached or cynical. It makes you free. Free to experiment with different ways of being, free to change your mind about what matters, free to evolve without being paralyzed by the fear of losing yourself. The ultimate understanding is that you are not any particular version of yourself. You are the consciousness that experiences all versions of yourself. You are not the caterpillar or the butterfly. You are the awareness that witnesses the entire transformation. The courage to keep dying. The most courageous people are not those who never experience fear, but those who feel fear and choose growth anyway. In the context of identity death, courage means being willing to keep dying, to keep transforming, to keep becoming even when the process is uncomfortable. As you age, there's a natural tendency to solidify your identity, to decide who you are and stop changing. This is understandable. Transformation is exhausting, and there's comfort in knowing who you are. But this comfort comes at the cost of aliveness. The moment you stop growing is the moment you start dying, not just psychologically, but spiritually. The courage to keep dying means staying open to transformation throughout your entire life. It means being willing to outgrow your current identity, even when that identity is successful or comfortable. It means choosing growth over security, becoming over being, possibility over certainty. The practice of continued transformation requires what Buddhists call beginner's mind, the ability to approach life with freshness and curiosity, regardless of how much experience you've accumulated. It means treating each phase of your life as a new adventure, rather than a repetition of what came before. This attitude toward continued death and rebirth is what keeps people young, regardless of their chronological age. They remain vital because they remain willing to change. They stay interesting because they stay interested. They continue to grow because they continue to die. The question that determines your aliveness is this: what version of yourself is ready to die so that your next self can be born? This question should be revisited regularly throughout your life, not because you need to constantly change, but because you need to remain open to the possibility of change. The invitation to die before you die. We end where we began, with the recognition that the most profound transformation requires the death of who you used to be. This death is not something that happens to you. It's something you can choose to participate in consciously and courageously. You can feel them stirring restlessly in the confines of your current identity. They've served their purpose, learned their lessons, and brought you to this moment of possibility. They're ready to step aside so your next self can step forward. Are you ready to let your former self rest in peace so your authentic self can live in power? The butterfly is waiting, but first, the caterpillar must dissolve. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. Richard Bach, your transformation is not a tragedy, it's a miracle. But miracles require surrender. They require death. They require the courage to let go of who you were to become who you truly are. The time for clinging is over. The time for becoming has begun. Live fully, transform completely,